Hey friends, welcome to the Passion and Purpose Podcast. It's Mental Health Awareness Month, and today we're diving into a conversation that hits close to home for a lot of us. We have one of my dear friends, Levi Lusko, with us. He's a pastor, author, and someone who's not afraid to talk about the messy middle of mental health, faith, and showing up when life feels disorienting. Levi just released a brand new book called Blessed Are the Spiraling. And it's all about finding joy through Jesus in the middle of the chaos in your mind. If you've ever felt overwhelmed, anxious, or like things are spiraling out of control, you're not alone. And I'm praying this episode is helpful to you. So excited to welcome my friend, and he needs no introduction, obviously, but wow, what a privilege to have gotten to know this guy over the last handful of years. Met somewhat randomly, but I believe it was the providence of God that led to a real, true friendship of families, both the Giglios and the Luskos, and definitely a friendship between me and my friend Levi Lusko. So welcome to the Passion and Purpose Podcast, pastor of Fresh Life Church, author, speaker, movement leader, Levi Lusko.
Louie, thank you so much for having me back. Man, what an introduction. Jeez.
I love when we get to sit down, and before we jump into talking about your new book, by the way, which we're going to talk about a lot today, Blessed Are the Spiraling. It looks like that if you're checking us out by video. It's available everywhere right now, and my goodness, what a word. Before we get into that, I love to ask people, Levi, this is the Passion and Purpose Podcast. So tell us about Levi Lusko. How would you describe your passion, and how would you describe your purpose?
Yeah, well, first of all, thanks for having me back. Purpose, glorify God, bring Him glory, enjoy Him forever. I don't think we get any purpose in this world outside of that, right? The renown, the worth of Jesus. So that's what's refreshing about remembering that is that passion can ebb and flow. And there's days where I'm more passionate, less passionate. It shifts, it changes, it grows. I think storytelling, creativity, art, that's always resonated with me. As far as a passion goes, raising my kids I'm passionate about. There's loving my wife, serving her well, but all of those as a microcosm of my purpose. And I think that's kind of how I look at those two things. My purpose never changes, and the passion can.
Man, I love that answer so much. I ask everybody that comes on the podcast those same questions. And Levi, I love what you're saying because I think it's easy for us sometimes to make our passion our purpose. Like you talked about storytelling, and a lot of people say, well, my purpose in life is to tell stories, or my purpose in life is to raise a godly family, but those are passions. There's got to be a bigger, more enveloping reason for it all. And I love you articulating that. I just want to live for the glory of God and for His fame.
It's the thread, baby.
That's it. We met because of pain. I don't know if we would have met anyway, I'm sure. Our worlds were somewhat almost colliding a lot of times, but you and I met because of incredible, incredible pain. And we've talked about it a lot. I preached about it a few Sundays ago at Passion City Church. You and Jenny lost your daughter a few days before Christmas. She was 5 years old. In a really, really tragic moment, situation where you were trying to do everything you could to help, but at the end of the day, she slipped away into heaven. And because of that, you wrote a book called Through the Eyes of a Lion, which, talking about passions, that might be one of, I'm sure looking back from heaven, will be one of the things that God used you to leave into the hands of people and the hearts of people on earth. But that's why we met. You were promoting the book. I was speaking at the same conference you were at. All of a sudden, we had seemed like 8-hour conversation that night.
We've never really ended. It just keeps going.
It's still going. But pain has been a real signature in your story. And I was even thinking, Levi, back to Speak Conference when you were here and got the news about your dad. And I want to say, I don't know exactly how all of it transpired, but pretty soon after that, you and I were leading a breakout together on preaching through pain. Right after you'd gotten this news about your dad's diagnosis, and now your dad has also slipped away into heaven with Linya. So talk about how are you still here after those kind of body blows?
Yeah, well, there but the grace of God. I mean, I think honestly, the peace passes understanding, and that's what's great. Because everyone always tells me, I don't think I could go through what you've gone through, specifically with Linya. Like any parent that thinks about it or puts himself there, they always say that. And I think I would have said the exact same thing. Like I don't know how I could go through that. And then you get into that situation, and God gets you through it. He gives you the peace. I mean, I think that tremendous of a wound is going to do something, and either it's going to be tremendously used to advance God's kingdom, or to make you bitter, or to make you, addicted to a substance. For me and for Jenny, I think we fell into the arms of Jesus, and he showed us treasures in the darkness. It takes a dark sky in a remote place to see the aurora borealis, and I think we got to see the goodness of God in the midst of that deep pain. The Linya one specifically, and he's been so kind through all of the different things that he's brought out of it in his mercy. You sharing her story at Passion this last conference. I mean, and that becoming a part of helping 18 to 20, 5-year-olds learn about how their lives can be used for something greater than just themselves. I mean, so watching her story go out, we're about to hit the 10-year mark of Through the Eyes of a Lion, and we're working on an updated and expanded edition that's going to be out later on. Wow. And so just it being in different languages like that, I'm just amazed at God's kindness. I mean, we miss her. There's hard moments still, of course, all the little benchmarks and that kind of thing. And then my dad's death, as you have gone through, as Shelley's most recently gone through, has been a bewildering grief. Because I thought I would be better at grief having my card punched already. But that day in Passion City, when we were at that conference, and he called me, you were speaking, and he called me 3 times in a row. And so the third call, I was like, well, something's going on. I went out, slipped out, and ended up in one of the little storage rooms in Bloom where you guys have diapers stored. It's just a full room full of diapers. And then I'm just standing there, and he's crying, telling me he's got a terminal diagnosis. And then literally it was like, I didn't have a chance to talk to you about it or anybody about it. And then we were in that session. So, I mean, it was the beginning of a whole process of sorrow and just navigating that really unexpected but expected reality, right?
Yeah, I even you saying that right now makes me wonder. I was kind of redialing, was I good enough friend to you when your dad passed away? Because I sometimes have forgotten it, but when you were talking just then, it all came flooding back to me. But my dad, most people know, had a disabling health event and became an invalid almost overnight for 7 years. And then he died of a heart attack, unexpectedly, unrelated to his illness. And my goodness, Levi, we almost lost my dad so many times. Went through multiple brain surgeries and all kinds of life-threatening moments. But man, when he died, it hit me like a freight train. It just absolutely leveled me. I didn't get over it for years. And it would just come in waves out of nowhere. It was the worst pain I've ever felt in my life. And I'm just thinking about you right now, and my heart goes out to you because I know what that feels like. And you kind of think, oh, I'll be ready for that. But there is no getting ready for that.
Yeah, and I kind of naively, I mean, we knew it was happening, as everyone knows deep down their parents are going to die. And then, of course, the whole cancer journey is such an up and down, and hope in the surgery, maybe we'll get 2 more years. And it just, and then when it all ended up coming down, it all happened so quickly. You were such a source of encouragement to me all throughout it. From talking when you got the diagnosis to the texts in the hospital, you and Shelley were at my dad's service. But I think at a certain point, you can only dull the blade so much. It's hard. It's really hard. And he was such a good man and such a friend and such a good grandfather. So for me, that became just another one more spiral. I think we come out of one season, we come out of one pit, and then you find yourself back in it.
People were saying Sunday, after you preached here, that I guess at the end of both the gatherings, you gave people an opportunity just to acknowledge that the message was resonating with them. And what I heard immediately from Sunday was so many people were lifting hands across all the gatherings saying this message is really resonating. And I was like, how could it not? Everybody listening to our conversation right now is either coming up out of one or going into a season of hurt, pain, loss, struggle. And we're in the middle of Mental Health Awareness Month, and that's why we're doing this little collection of podcasts around the idea of mental health, and just really wanting to keep that conversation going so that people don't feel like it's a stigma if they're struggling in the dark. Talk a little bit personally about walking through hardship, not just things that you've had to process, like the death of a loved one, but your own struggle, your own internal struggle.
Yeah, well, I think it's so important you're having this conversation and creating space for people to feel seen in their struggles. And you have been such a role model for that, of just being open about difficulties and teaching us that we can normalize that. So I think that's really great. The struggle that I wrote about in this book was one that caught me so by surprise, because it wasn't connected to a grief or wasn't connected to a loss. It was just normal driving down the road, and then at the age of 38 started to have really debilitating panic attacks at bedtime, and then started to really just struggle with drive, with vision, with forward momentum, with all the things that have come so naturally to me for my whole life, just always on to the next thing. I've had, if anything, the opposite trouble, have a hard time celebrating anything, because it's like, on to the next thing.
Done that. Let's go to the next thing.
Yeah, that's just definitely my default. And so this 18-month-long period was, I started having real apathy and just wasn't feeling the same sense of motivation. And, looking back on it, I could see it's because I was at this midlife point. I was at a place where I wasn't young anymore like I had been when I started preaching in my 20s, and I wasn't old. I was in transition, and I was shifting in seasons and kind of struggling to find my footing in being, at that point in transition. So it was just really confusing, I think, to face that.
What do you think now, Levi, looking back? I mean, I mental illness is difficult because you can't touch it, and it's hard to describe. You can't see it. And I know, I don't know how I got into the pit I fell in. I'm not 1,000% sure how I got out. I just know by the grace of God, I kept leaning in, and somehow the light dawned. But if you were looking back from this vantage point to that, maybe to somebody who right now is beginning to fall into that spiral, they're feeling some of those same things you just talked about. Is there something you would do now, knowing what you've been through, if you were to fall into that again?
I think there were definitely some things that I did that contributed to it. I think pace, I think intensity, I think to some degree, for example, before that season, let's say I needed to go and speak on the other side of the world in an event, I would also pre-record and be preaching here, and then have the schedule land where it's like, well, I got asked to speak in Boston, so if I land in JFK from coming from Europe, I can do that. And then meanwhile, I'll on the plane be writing the talk for Back at Fresh Life, and then just more than really it would be wise. I think I've learned, hey, I can say no to things just as well as I can say yes to them. And everybody, of course, has a hard time with margin and just thinking they can do it all. And I think the problem with, your 20s and 30s, you have gas enough in the tank to spare, and you can end up burning the candle a little bit. My psychologist coming out of this helped me to understand that when you get to your peak state, so if someone listening, gets up at a conference and has to speak, or you're an athlete, you have to get at the top of the blade to do what you do. My psychologist called that peak arousal, where every fiber in your being is focused on doing. If you're a brain surgeon, your peak state of arousal is when you're doing your brain surgery, that you need to learn to come down from that peak state. Wow. And your whole system has to come down. And if you don't sufficiently come down before you enter in a new spike of arousal, eventually everything's just going to start spilling over, because you haven't come down before you start a new state. It's adrenaline, it's all those different things. And I think for for too long, not coming down enough before going back up again. And then, having to rely on caffeine or whatever else, lack of sleep, those things catch up to you. And eventually the body does keep the score, as they say. And so I think those would be some contributing factors that someone ahead of time can be aware of, I think. But the biggest advice I guess I would say, and maybe the most important is if you fall into a pit today, or if you've fallen into a spiral today, is just to not make any big sudden moves.
Wow.
We all tend, and the reason I think midlife crisis cliche is what it is around divorce or quitting a job or, whatever, calling that old boyfriend from Facebook, is because when you fall into something like this, you just feel like I need to make a sudden move, and you're so kicked up emotionally. And so I think one of the things we have to sort of agree with ourselves about in community is we're just not going to make any sudden moves in the midst of a storm. We're going to stick to the plan from what we made in saner moments. And so to be candid, when I began to feel this big struggle, one of the things that was so appealing to me, almost to a point of like fantasy, was not having the responsibility of leading the church that I love.
Wow.
And that I was called by God, my wife and I, to start, and that we've given our lives to and we love. But I would sort of see these people who just maybe speak here and there and write a book here and there, and just all of the easy, none of the difficult, none of the challenging, none of the confusing. And so I had to ask myself, why am I wanting to do this? Well, because right now I'm feeling all of these feelings. Well, I didn't start the church based on a feeling. I started on a calling. So I'm not going to leave it on a feeling.
Oh.
And so I'm going to focus on getting healthy. I'm just going to keep preaching Jesus. I'm just going to keep pointing people to him. A little bit like Job did. I don't know why all this is happening, but I'm going to just keep worshiping you almost by muscle memory. And then I sort of said to myself and to our board of directors and everybody else, I said, I'm going to focus on getting healthy. And then on the back end, if God calls me to transition leadership, that's a different story than leaving because I'm in a difficult emotional place.
Wow. I think that is such great advice, is to not make big decisions when you're feeling that weight or there's a fog around you of any kind really in that situation. But talk about hope. A lot of people listening to us right now are like, hey, sounds like you guys made it. Congratulations. I don't see me making it. I'm not sure I'm going to come out on the other side and have a story, write a book, have a testimony. Right now, I don't see that as a possibility, and I don't know what to do right now.
Well, I think you Louie, would say the same that I would say. Like, the literal last thing on any of my mind was like, this is going to be a message I'm going to share, because you're almost like living hand to mouth. Like, I don't know how I'm going to make it through tonight. Like walking up the stairs to my bedroom, am I going to have another panic attack tonight? Am I going to have my heart going 190 beats per minute? I laugh, but like when that first one came, I remember going, okay, I need to read the Bible right now. And so I grabbed the book of Ephesians. My whole life has given me comfort. In Ephesians, the words were just like moving on the page and shimmering. Nothing was makes sense to me. And then I was like, okay, I can't read. I got to listen. So I pulled up literally the Passion City Church podcast and grabbed your talk from the weekend. And I tried to close my eyes and listen to a Bible study and calm myself down. And my heart like got more intense. And I remember saying to myself, Ephesians and Louie aren't helping me. I am in big trouble. Like, this is not good. And I woke up Jenny and said, please pray for me. I'm going to take a shower. I don't know what's going on. I feel like I'm going to have a heart attack. The next day I got in to see my doctor. I got to see my counselor. I called up 3 or 4 people close to me and just let people know what was going on. And so I get it. When you say like, I don't know if I'm going to make it to next year. It's like, I didn't know that I was going to make it to Tuesday. And I think you don't have to allow the big fear of the future. Just approach the problem from every angle. Like I'm saying, maybe you need to see your doctor. Maybe you need to call a friend. Maybe you need to get in for some counseling. I think just work the problem slowly and surely. And for me, some amount of the solution came from all those perspectives. My doctor asked me to send a list of everything I was taking. And in addition to the coffee, there was some supplements I was taking that someone had told me about to use in the gym, and they're illegal. They're legal. It wasn't like, steroids or anything. It was a pre-workout that had 4 times the recommended dosage of caffeine just in this one supplement. And it said on the back of the bottle, may cause feelings of panic. So I can pray for God to help me with a panic attack, but I was kind of inducing them with that supplement. Then the counselor helped me to understand coming down from the peaks of arousal, like I was saying. The friends just encouraged me. Friends like you, who when I was disclosing some of this to you in a voice memo we were sharing back and forth, like you didn't slam me or shame me. You encouraged me and shared your own shared experience. So I think if you're in it right now, just begin, like I said, working the problem from all angles.
I love what you're saying, and I just want to underscore it again, Levi, because there's so many different viewpoints as believers in a supernatural God who does supernatural things that, we don't need this or that, but God created medicine and doctors, and God created wise people with good counsel. You mentioned Jenny praying for you, your counselor, your doctor. And I just want to say that again as we're reaching out to people across the world right now. If you need help, get help. And most likely it's going to come from multiple sources, and God is the source. The Spirit of God, the living Spirit of God is the source. The Word of God is the source. Prayer is the way, but there are ways that God is then going to move. And some of those things are simple as, hey, don't take the supplements anymore. They're really terrible. Talk a little bit about living on the other side. Things happen. Some of them won't get fixed in life, and you come out of the spiral, and there's been loss, and now we're in the after. Talk about the after.
Well, and I would just add to what you're saying that my doctor did give me a prescription that was a fire extinguisher. And while I was learning breathing techniques that would regulate panic, and while I was learning better scheduling choices, days of recovery, resting into busy seasons, not just out of them. All of those things take time to have their work in your system. My doctor said, here's a Xanax prescription. When the panic attack comes, take it sooner, take it quicker, put the fire out while you're dealing with the underlying stuff. And there's no shame in that. And so for me, that was life-giving to know I had a fire extinguisher option to put that out. So to someone out there going, like, I still even have that half full bottle from they originally gave me. It gives me comfort knowing, hey, it's there if I ever need it, So let me just throw that out there. Although someone's like, it's probably expired. I should check on that. But the after is beautiful. The after is when you get to look back. I met 2 storm chasers on our book tour when we released it, because I talk about tornadoes and the science of storms and all the different things. And I was very nervous would my stuff have, and they said, you said it right, especially they pointed out that I had mentioned the classification of tornadoes F2, F3, F4, F5. They don't give those out based on how the storm appears in the future. It's only after it's passed, they assess the damage, and then they get to categorize it.
Wow.
So the word for somebody today is, you might feel like you're being destroyed, or your life's over, or you're never going to dance again, or any of these things you feel, and that's fine that you feel that. Just know this: God gets the last word, and only then do we get to label it. So I look back on my tornado season that I wrote about in this book, and I'm even starting to see that with my father's going to heaven, and I definitely see lots of it with Linya, because I've got time from it, that God did all things well. And he had a plan, and there was a blessing in it. There was treasure in it. There was beauty in it. And, the growth comes not in easy times. The growth comes in hard times. So if you're right now going through it, I speak over your spiraling, that there's going to come a day where as you keep walking with him, you're going to look back and you're going to be able to write over that storm that it was a time of blessing.
You and I, that's so good. We're talking about Blessed Are the Spiraling, by the way, in case you just somehow dropped in. Levi's latest book just came out, and is a definite truckload of encouragement for every single person. You sometimes there's a book and you go, oh, I know who needs this book. Everybody needs this book. And I encourage you to get your hands on it and get into it. You and I get to speak, or we're called to have the opportunity, privilege to speak to a lot of people, but everybody gets to preach to somebody. Everybody's got a congregation, whether it's the people at the office or the people on the pickleball team or whatever. And we have a story to tell, and your story and my story. I think the messages that I share, Levi, that resonate the most with people are around the storms and the pain. I don't hardly preach any messages around ease, joyous days, sunny seasons. The messages that seem to have the weight are the ones about loss and about pain and about grief. And it seems like somehow that preaching rests on the platform of pain. Our gospel message sits on a great story of pain and agony and loss and death and resurrection, but a lot of pain.
Yeah, I mean, that's where the good stuff is. I mean, I think it's where fires have been that huckleberries grow best in Montana. If you want to go pick huckleberries, you're going to find them where a fire moved through, and that fire fertilizes the ground and the ash and all those things. I mean, our entire faith system started with death that led to resurrection, and then he says, come pick up your cross and die with me.
Wow.
Like, that preaches well until you live it. But we get to be dying daily, finding ourselves in the cross, finding ourselves in the empty tomb. And I think being that seed that goes into the ground and dies, and we become that microcosm. And I think that's where the discipleship happens. That's where God knocks off our rough edges. I think we get right-sized in our pain.
Yeah.
It's easy to get a little big in your mind as God's using you and all the things. But then I think the trials get us back on our knees, get us back on our faces on the ground, and we humble ourselves in his sight, and then he picks us back up. And so I think that you're right. I think we connect with people in loss. I think God speaks loudly. He puts a microphone into our hands. And I think every single person listening has a story to tell and has the chance to put their hand on someone's shoulder and in whatever they're facing and encourage them in that way.
Yeah, the thorn is real. I was preaching a couple months ago, but God gets the glory. And that's what Paul was saying. Yes, I've tried to get rid of this thing. Apparently it's going to be a part of the story, but then he doesn't go on and talk about the thorn. He goes on and talks about the grace that is sufficient. And we just want to encourage everybody listening today, be honest about what you're going through, but at the same time, you're here today by the grace of God. I think that's Levi and I's message to everyone listening today. You're still here. And I'm sure that the enemy tried to tell you yesterday that you wouldn't make it to today. Tried to tell you last week that you would make it to this week. Tried to tell you last month that you wouldn't make it to this month. But here you are by the grace of God. So champion the grace of God that is moving you through the spiral and through the storm. Levi's going to say just something personal and powerful and pray for everybody listening to this podcast right now.
Well, I would just close with this idea that you don't have to have an epic loss story or a big, huge, reason to hurt. Some people are right now, you're just spiraling or confused, or you feel like a shifting season has come, and it almost is like you don't feel like you have the right to be as lost as you are or as disoriented as you are. I have a friend who retired from a career that he was always looking forward to retiring from, but then the moment he got there, it didn't feel like what he thought it was going to feel like. And he was saying he misses certain aspects about his previous life, and now he feels bad, but it's like, I don't feel like anybody wants to hear me complain that, I get to do what I've always wanted to do. So to the person who's just like, I just feel like I would just say you're allowed to feel what you're going through. You're allowed to feel it. And if it hurts to you, it matters to God, and God's willing to use it. And I would just encourage you to trust him with it. Be honest and open. Tell somebody, text someone, pick up the phone, take the wise choices. It's amazing how good you feel after you sit and breathe and let the Holy Spirit, flow through your breath physically, but also spiritually. Take a walk, leave your phone, go watch the sunset. Those sorts. It's amazing how often physical creation is woven together with worship in the Psalms. And we live in these cities. We can DoorDash our food, but to get outside, to see the stars, to do something where you're going to get fresh air, work up a sweat, all of those things are going to help God inhabit your body with his presence like he wants to. So, Lord, I do ask for every single person listening who is struggling today, unique situation, and they feel like I don't feel like I feel justified to her, and that's not the point. Comparing pain, ranking pain, but just accepting, lamenting, being willing to mourn an outgoing season, what we missed about having our kids at home, what we missed about our 20s, whatever, that we can mourn and say goodbye so that we're poised to actually enter into what you have for us in the coming days. And thank you for the ways you do want to weave these things together, even the ways we feel like we're disoriented. If they get us on our knees and they get us to you, then our eyes can be once again wide with wonder at your glory, and to be amazed, and to keep our purpose where it should be, to glorify you, and then let you steer and guide our passions as you see fit. And we pray this in Jesus' name. Amen.
Amen. Wow. I love our times, and I love today. Just feels like where life is. Levi Lusko, everyone on the Passion and Purpose podcast. What a treat to have you on today.
Oh my gosh, so much fun.
What a gift to have Levi on the podcast. I hope this conversation helped you breathe a little deeper, think a little clearer, and feel a little less alone in the middle of the season you're in. If today's episode resonated with you, share it with someone who needs it. And if you're looking for more encouragement, Levi's latest book, Blessed Are the Spiraling, is an incredible resource that meets you right where you are. Thank you so much for joining us on the Passion and Purpose podcast. We'll see you next time.